Trying to tackle a sensitive subject that has created a lot of controversy in the past can be a very daunting task for any writer. But I think that the MLP staff handled it pretty well here. There is still room for a little improvement, but I'm actually impressed that they managed to pull it off as well as they did. As the episode begins, we see a train that is being pulled by several ponies, at a rather fast pace too. Considering that all the other trains that we see in the series are self-propelled, I have to wonder why there are ponies pulling this one. Maybe the boiler broke. Back in the caboose, we hear Applejack reading a story to an apple tree. I realize that it is quite likely that Applejack had raised this tree from a tiny seed, but this still seems just a little over the top. That evening, we get a rather odd yet incredibly memorable conversation from the main six.
I do not think she's a tree.
Did you say she was a tree?
No. Well, yes, but not exactly.
You know she's not a tree, right?
She's not a tree, Dashi. I'd like to be a tree.
It's amazing what you can come up with when you are walking in on others mid-conversation. I can understand why this sort of thing has remained such a quotable scene within the fandom, but it still sounds so odd every time I think about it. Why would Fluttershy want to be a tree? What exactly could she do as a tree that she can't already do as a pony? I mean, would she really want birds nesting in her hair? Or have squirrels living inside her trunk? I realize that this part of the episode really doesn't do much to move the plot forward other than getting Spike to sleep in the caboose, but it's still a funny scene. And Rarity's face at the end is priceless. During the buffalo stampede, we get our first look at Little Strongheart. Considering the way she is set up here, you'd think that she would be a very prominent character throughout this entire episode. Especially with how she is able to impress Rainbow Dash with how agile she is. It's a shame that her most notable moments in the episode are right here in the beginning. They really could have done a lot more with her character. But it certainly does move the plot along when she manages to detach the caboose with Spike and Bloomberg still inside. The train arrives at Appaloosa, and we get a bit more of a memorable performance from the character of Brayburn. It really helps him to stand out with his overly positive attitude, along with some creative puns when they are touring the town. When we finally get back to the plot, though, we hear about how the buffalo don't want any more apple trees planted in the field next to town. Considering that the Appaloosans need those trees for their livelihood, it is understandable as to why they would want to keep the trees there. Which of course creates one side of the conflict. In the next scene, we notice that Rainbow Dash is sneaking about in the middle of the desert. Now, I have to wonder why she is hiding behind rocks instead of flying high in the sky. If she really was trying to find where the buffalo are, wouldn't it make more sense to get a wide-ranging view from above? We see Pinky and Rainbow get surrounded by the buffalo, and Rainbow immediately tells Pinky to run for it while she holds them off. Once again, we see an example of Rainbow being vastly overconfident in the face of danger. But then again, maybe she might have been able to create a whirlwind to fight them off. But that really isn't necessary, as the buffalo are calmed by Spike. Apparently dragons are deeply respected by the buffalo, which actually makes me rather curious. I have to wonder just how often dragons come by these desert lands. It may well be that dragons are so very rare here that they are almost a legend. I would be curious to see just why the buffalo have such respect for dragonkind, though. But at the very least, it is good to see that the writers are continuing to add depth to the world of Equestria. We get an explanation from the buffalo about how the settlers have planted their apple trees all over their stampeding grounds that they have been using for many generations, which gives us the other side of the conflict. And of course, when both sides of the conflict finally get the chance to talk to each other, it doesn't go all that well. Or at least it might have accomplished something if it weren't for the fact that neither Applejack nor Rainbow Dash are allowing anyone else to talk. They both have legitimate points, but I'm rather surprised to see both of them being so quick to anger. It reminds me of how they were acting during Fall Weather Friends, but in that episode Applejack was actually being patient with Rainbow and trying to be a good sport. She didn't resort to being angry until after failing multiple times with getting Rainbow to play fair. In this case, though, it seems a bit puzzling as to why they would seek to start yelling at each other so quickly. But Twilight is able to calm them down when she realizes that both sides of the conflict have a good reason to use the land. And Pinky comes up with an idea to bring everyone together. We see her come up with a short song that talks about sharing and caring, and even how they are all vegetarians. I don't know about that. I keep finding little pieces of evidence throughout the show that the ponies are not strictly vegetarians. As for the song itself, I thought it was cute. However, it seems that the audience didn't care for it at all, even to the point of saying that it was the worst performance they have ever seen. Really. This doesn't seem like the kind of song that was made to be intentionally bad for the show. I mean, when you look at the showstoppers, you know that they were trying to be creative about how over the top they could make the song. This one doesn't seem to have been made for that reason, and I actually think it's okay. Well, it seems that the two sides are determined to force their side of the conflict onto the other. And as we see their preparations, the main six are still trying to encourage some kind of alternative to the fight. This is a rather interesting moment in the series because it shows a very realistic view of how quickly a conflict can escalate into hatred when neither side is willing to compromise. I guess that could be a reason as to why they were showing Applejack and Rainbow yelling at each other earlier, because they were trying to emphasize that this can happen between friends as well. You really wouldn't expect to see a war in MLP when you are first starting to watch the series. It is true that they are using apple pies instead of bullets, but I believe it makes for a very good teaching moment for children. It brings a very believable conflict that shows what can happen when you give in to hatred while still being tame enough to be put into MLP. Even the tension they build up just before the battle is well done. And they show a very brief moment where even Chief Thunderhooves is hesitating, which adds a very real human element to the story. I am impressed with how they put in this fight, as it shows that both sides of a conflict can have legitimate reasons for their point of view. It is simple enough for a child to understand, and yet still relevant enough for an adult to learn something new. And those are the kind of lessons that I really like to see from MLP. But even with all the serious moments that they put in here, they still have some good moments of comedy to make us smile again. I actually like how they overplayed the fall of Chief Thunderhooves and the overdramatic reactions of all the townsfolk. Overall, I actually enjoyed rewatching this episode more than I remember. Even though they could have improved a couple elements here and there, I'm still impressed by how well they pulled it off. I like how they can take such a complex issue and simplify it just enough to be understandable for even a young child, while still being relevant enough for even an adult to learn a thing or two from. The comedic moments are still classics, and the battle they come up with actually draws you into the story. But what do you think? Do the good elements of Over a Barrel stand out for you? Or do the mediocre moments drag down the episode overall? I would like to hear your thoughts about Over a Barrel, as well as any ideas you might have on why Fluttershy would want to be a tree. I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.